What's up, AfterBuzzers? We're back here for episode 8 of Cults and Extreme Beliefs. Tonight, we gathered different survivors of these cults, had very interesting conversations. On this episode tonight, we're going to be breaking down those conversations, those revelations, and of course, you'll want to stick around for a special segment and our news updates. Stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
All right, welcome back, guys.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, yet another episode back here for episode 8. I'm your host, Juliet Vibert. Thanks for tuning in. I'm here with the lovely Taylor. How are you doing, Taylor Gates?
I'm doing good. This was an interesting episode in that it was a lot different than kind of what we've been seeing.
Right. The structure was completely different, as I talked about on the top. We gathered everyone and kind of had to see what their commonalities were, where they differed on certain opinions and things of that nature. And it was really, really interesting. And I cannot wait to break this down. Thank you again for tuning in. We're going to be talking about just the notion of what is a cult. What does it mean to be breaking their silence, and what is society's judgment on these cults and people who join these cults, the false promises that happen when you are part of a cult, and survivor's guilt, and so much more. So let's dive in. Tell me a little bit about your opinion overall as this episode, because again, it's very different from anything we've seen in the past.
Yeah, as someone who's watched, from beginning to end of the series or beginning until now, it felt a little bit repetitive. I feel like maybe A&E kind of wanted to draw more viewers in, and so they gave them little samples during this episode to hope, more people would go back and want the full story. So I was like a little disappointed we didn't get that much new information. However, what I did really like is I liked the fact that they gathered everyone together. I thought like their interaction with each other was really interesting to see, and at times it was really kind of beautiful because they were very supportive of each other, and you could tell that they shared all these commonalities even if their experiences were kind of different. Like, since they both they'd all gone through this sort of traumatic event, it was like really nice to see them kind of coming together and lifting each other up.
Right. I really agree. And it's true that throughout this series, we've learned that each cult is very specific in the way that they have their beliefs and have certain things to do and not do. Yet this overlying aspect of having something control your life and having all these false promises promise you a life that isn't true, and this mind control is something they could all really relate to, because as much as we talk about it, you and I, Taylor, have not been in a cult, and therefore it's just we cannot, as much as we try, we can't really fully relate. And it was kind of nice to see all these people in the same room, to see them discuss their different opinions and just their journey in general.
Yeah.
But I do agree, and on the flip side is that it seemed a little bit superficial in the sense where I wanted to dig deeper.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I wanted to figure out, okay, we didn't need those flashbacks. This was a great episode, but then in this case, this should have been episode 1 when you're gathering everyone, because it was they talked about what is a cult. What are these notions? And this seemed like an introductory episode, not a wraparound for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. What I want from, not a reunion episode necessarily, but, to compare it to a reunion episode, because we are bringing all these people together. I want updates. We had a few new-ish stories, new pieces of information, but I wanted to move forward. And like you said, I feel like we were kind of moving back, and this felt like a little teaser for the rest of the series.
100%. And then you and I talked a little bit about this offline, something that I've been missing throughout this whole season, and I can understand it with the previous episodes, because within 40 to 45 minutes there's so much to tell, so I kind of forgive it in that sense. But in this episode, I thought it was a missed opportunity, because we always talk about them getting back up and them finally deciding to leave a cult, and what does it mean to transition into a regular life outside of a cult. And again, very surface level for me on this, and I really want to know. I even see this as like a scripted show maybe, or some kind of documentary.
Yeah.
We hear about these some of them are involved in organizations to help people lift themselves back up, but how does that happen? Because you have to relearn everything.
Yeah, and we've got little tastes of that throughout the specific cult episodes where we really delved into one particular one. But I agree, that would have been cool to really kind of highlight their specific organizations, them helping other people adjust to life outside of these places.
Right. One of the driving forces of this is Sarah, because Sarah was a recruiter for so many years that she's trying to make things right by, I guess you can reverse recruit in a way, trying to find the people that she's brought inside the cult and try to let them see the light and let them see that this was all wrong. And she's kind of making a wrong into a right, and that's really her driving force. And I thought that was very inspirational.
I agree, and I like how they kind of differentiated with her, like, guilt versus just trying to do the right thing. Like, she doesn't seem like obviously she feels bad, but she doesn't seem like she's just, driven by this racked guilt, which is good because it's like she was a victim in all of this too. She feels very empowered, I feel like, and she wants to just kind of rectify her actions by making a difference rather than, like, sort of just harping on it and living in this space. Like, I like that she's moving on and using her experiences to kind of drive as a driving force.
Yeah, I thought, and she was very interesting to me, especially within this panel, because we had Romy, who is part of the Jehovah's Witnesses, we had Sammy with the 12 tribes, and Elijah with the Nation of Islam. All three of those people were born into those cults. She was the only one who joined NXIVM when she was, I believe it was her late 20s or mid 30s or so. So she was a fully grown woman, right? And so it was really interesting for them to remind us of that, because we opened with NXIVM. That was our first episode that you and I really both enjoyed. If you guys have not checked out our breakdown of that, go make sure to check out the after show for the first episode. It was really, really worth rewatching. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because it just reinforces that idea that she full on made this choice, whereas these other people kind of didn't, and this was just their reality.
And it was interesting to see and be reminded of the fact that she's still really fresh out of this cult. She hasn't even been out for a year. She said it was like 9 or 10 months.
Yeah.
And these other people have been out for longer than that, for several years at least. So that was a kind of interesting, like, differentiation between her and the other ones too, is that she's still kind of a newbie, not being on the inside of this cult anymore.
Yeah, she really is. I think they said that Sammy it's been over a decade that she's been out. You have Elijah, who's, he remarried, has children of his own, is really building a life for himself. So yeah, it was really interesting to see how that wound for her in a way is a lot fresher. Yet, on the opposite side, I still feel that whether it's 10 months or 13 years like Sammy, their journey just seems the same.
Yeah.
And actually, Sammy said at one point, she said, just because I'm out of the cult, I don't feel free. And that really broke my heart. Was that a surprising statement to you?
Somewhat, but I understand how those wounds could still be there because that was her whole childhood, and she went through, her episode was one of the most heartbreaking for me, so I understand how you wouldn't be. I understand why you still have those scars and feel those echoes, like, with you still, especially because her family's still in. I think that's a huge thing for her. Like, she was talking about how her little sister, she hasn't seen her in, like, 14 years, and she tried to email her at one point, so it's like, it never is really going away. Like, she's still being reminded of it so often through these other things.
Right, that's something that they all gathered around, this notion of being shunned, because it's when it comes to cults and you leaving a cult, more than likely you're going to be shunned, and they all could relate around that notion. And even though we had Sarah, who doesn't have any family members per se, she was saying that 12 people who were at her wedding, which is such an intimate event, no longer speak to her. Out of all the people there, 12 people, it's a big number. And she, even seeing her get emotional with hearing Sammy's story about her little sister, they all really felt for each other, and I really enjoyed at least seeing that support. And towards the end of the episode, they actually talked about how they're going to be there for each other. Would you like to see anything more with them? Would you like to maybe potentially see a show of them going to help other cults and them interact? Do you think that this community is a good support system for each other, or are they reminding each other of the past?
I think it's a good support system. I feel like there's always going to be rough days, but the fact that they can rely on each other, and like you said earlier at the beginning of this episode, like, they have this brotherhood and sisterhood that no one else can understand. And I feel like with A&E's show, like, they've been given the beginning of this really, really cool, really, really important platform. And so if the network did decide to continue this with a show and everyone else would just, keep getting more invested, more educated about it, I think that could be a really, really positive thing because they have the beginnings of this, like I said, this platform. It would be great to see them continue that.
Yeah, I think it'd be really something very, very positive. Another thing they all related towards is this notion of having to start over. And one of the main reasons why they did not leave sooner is that they have this paralyzing fear, the fear of the unknown, and they're deadly afraid to walk out the door. And again, this notion that people, when they talked about this a little bit, about people society has a judgmental view about cults, and they think it's, why would you be in this situation? Having these conversations really push this notion that it could happen to anybody, whether you're born into it or not. Taylor, before watching this show, did you have do you think any judgment per se about what cults were, what people who were in cults were?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd go as far as, like, some people in this episode have said that, like, that was so stupid, like, how could you ever do that? But it's like, part of you just doesn't understand, and it's like, it seems silly, like their beliefs just seem so logically, like, silly, you know what I mean? Because we were talking about, I don't know, in some of the episodes, how Jesus was, like, flying into different dimensions or something, like, all these really just kind of, outlandish beliefs. So I was like, how could you possibly be drawn into that? But, like, through this series, with all of the marketing they've gone through, with all of, like, the charisma of the leaders, it makes so much more sense now. And seeing these people look so normal, because they are normal people, like, it can really happen to anybody.
It really can. So is it safe to say that your opinion about cults or people part of cults has shifted since you've seen this show?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with some of the groups that did seem more harmless. Like, Sammy was talking about how everyone viewed the 12 tribes as, like, a friendly cult, and Jehovah's Witnesses were, like, very soft-spoken and went door to door. But seeing the more, like, cruel, dark side of it, there really is no, safe or harmless cult.
Exactly. Yeah, that's something that they pointed out that I thought was very important to point out. What are the warning signs? These people have gone through it and they have a lot of knowledge about this. What are the warning signs? And some of them were, if you don't question the leader, if the leader cannot do wrong, that's when you need to put things into perspective.
Yeah, and the cult expert, if you have to sign a waiver, like if you're not allowed to talk about certain experiences, like that's kind of a red flag too, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're shunned from your family, I think it's safe to say that's a red flag
Yeah,
too.
I think it's all these and they were saying that this instinct that you have within you that things aren't right, don't turn another cheek, don't go the other side. If you see a red flag or you feel something isn't right, that means that it is.
Yeah, lean
Lean into it. It's not something to be afraid of. And I mean, it's something to be afraid of, at least. And actually watching this show, it made me remember that in church, personally, I've heard actually pastors or preachers talk about how they sometimes conflict with their faith, and faith is something that's always evolving, and that there's certain days that really you feel really entwined with it, and other days that you're kind of combating because you don't understand why certain things are being thrown your way, and it's okay to have those doubts because that is part of faith.
That's so true.
So that made me realize, like, oh, okay, so then that means that's because there's this dialogue, because there's this notion that it is okay to be doubtful. That gives me more serenity that it's an okay thing, versus like, no, this is the law of the land, and it's this way or the highway.
That's a really, really good point that I hadn't thought of, but that's a really good point that you raised, because I mean, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and you would have priests say, like, oh, it's not always easy. Like, there's going to be times when you're going to feel conflicted and not really have the best day, like, in terms of faith and belief. And that is a sign of a healthy religion, which is interesting, which is also sort of counterintuitive. Like, you wouldn't think that religion would have, like, flaws, so to speak, like that, but that's really true.
Yeah, I think it's this idea that it's okay to question these things. It's okay to have these conversations, because when you're taking away that right, and it is it's a sin, and it's the worst of the worst for you to have any kind of doubt, again, red flag, as they
Yeah.
were pointed out. These are healthy conversations to have, and having these people together all in a room was really healthy. They even talked about how this was a little bit of a behind the scenes, and I thought it was cute that they put in the episode that Sarah and Romy, they were told they were not allowed to talk prior to the show because they really wanted this conversation to be really raw. And if you have these people talk before, we kind of lose a little bit of TV magic. However, they were in the dressing room and they broke their silence and they talked a little bit. And Sarah told her about her scar because she got branded. And that was, honestly, I think the best moment of the whole show for me, because she said that that Romy just looked at her and grabbed her hand and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry."
Yeah, I completely agree and it makes sense that why she would be the one not to ask questions like everyone else is inquiring about, well, why did they do it? How did they do it?
How did you allow this to happen?
Right. And it wasn't a judgmental thing. It was just a very comforting moment. And I agree. That was one of my absolute favorite parts too. And they were handing each other tissues and like crying when each other was telling their stories. And you could just tell there was this sense of like camaraderie.
Yeah. And another thing that I thought was really interesting is that as they're going through the layers and talking more about each other's journey, it actually allowed them to have certain breakthroughs. Elijah was talking about how he, as a child, was working all the time, and it was basically child abuse. What's the word they use? Not really child abuse. It's a worker. It's against laws for workers,
Right.
against child labor laws. And as he's telling these stories, we have Sammy, who stops and who says, "Oh my gosh, as you're saying this, I'm remembering that, wait, I was in the exact same situation. At 3 a.m, I would wake up and I would have to work for them." And she kind of, because there's so many scars, that's one thing that she kind of forgot about.
Yeah.
Isn't that the craziest thing? It took her that conversation and 13 years later to remember that she was in that same situation.
And it's something that she was like, oh, I wrote this off as it just being a part of my childhood. But when you hear someone else like vocalize something that happened, because I feel like oftentimes when it comes to yourself, like even just the way we talk to ourselves in the mirror, like, you know, you tell yourself like you have to change this about your appearance or that about your appearance. But when someone else vocalizes about themselves, like that's what hits you hard and kind of makes you turn the tables and be like, well, I would never want them to have to go through that. So why would I accept that for myself?
Right. When it comes to ourselves, we rationalize a lot of things that we probably shouldn't, and this being one of them. So I think that these conversations, again, are so important, yet, you know, for an audience who doesn't fully understand everything, and for these survivors to see that these conversations need to happen. And I really commend A&E, because this was a really strong show. It was tough to watch sometimes. Every week I was just like, okay, I want to see this. It's important. It's not the most uplifting, if we're being honest. But again, I think this was some really, really powerful television.
Yeah.
And
we have a part 2, right? Next week.
we do have a
Awesome.
part 2. And we'll be covering that. And AfterBuzz, we also cover a lot more other shows. So if you want to take a break from the A&E docu-series and want something a little bit lighter, we got you covered on that. Actually, Taylor, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on at the network?
Sure. So we actually produce shows for probably nearly every show on television and online in the digital space too. From dramas, reality TV, sci-fi, and more, there's no network that works harder to serve television fans. But now we need your help. We're asking that you please subscribe to one or more of our YouTube channels. By subscribing to our channel, YouTube will suggest content that's tailor-made for you, and you'll help AfterBuzz continue to grow. And if you're worried about pesky notifications, don't be, because they are optional. So hit that subscribe button now for this channel and check out our other AfterBuzz YouTube channels as well. This one's wrapping up, but we're still going to be all over your computer or wherever you stream. So we don't want to lose contact with you guys, because we love you guys that watch this show and comment. So let us know that you did that in the comments, and we'll thank you on the air. And for now, thanks for being the best fans and for helping us be the ESPN of TV talk.
Thank you, guys. Again, there's so much. It's really helpful to subscribe. I used to never really do it until the network told us, oh, would be good for you. And it is, because it irrigates all this content for you. So that way I don't have to be on YouTube kind of searching like, okay, what do I want to watch? It just comes to me. It's like a Netflix in a way. So really, really urge you guys to do that. And it helps us. So thank you for that too. Another thing I would like to discuss when it came to this episode was this idea of them. They were discussing where they were at spiritually today.
Oh, yeah.
This was such an important question to me, because it's a question I've had actually throughout the episodes. And I was really, really glad that they brought this up, because after going through all this traumatic stuff, how does your faith remain? And what does your faith look like? Because there's this conflicting notion of, did you believe was it all a lie? Is there some of it that's real? Like, this was a really, really interesting conversation. Were you surprised by these people's answers?
A little bit, because all of them still believe in some sort of spiritual being. Like, none of them are atheists or anything, which I thought was interesting because I figured that would be a lot more common.
Yeah, I feel like Elijah kind of said he was an atheist in a way. He didn't straight up label himself as that, but he was saying that he really has learned to just be appreciative of the moment and lives in the moment, and he just loves his family, and he just wants to be the best person he can be, and that religion or just spirituality wasn't really for him. So
none of their outlooks were really bleak though either, which was like the cool thing. Like I really enjoyed when Sammy was talking about how she was driving past that billboard and it said hope, and that's been one of the most important words for her. I really liked that moment. I think that's like all of their philosophies in a way. Is just like, I want to live my life and help other people and not hurt anyone in the process. And they don't judge anyone else for, being part of organized religion. That's just not really their thing, because of course you're going to have trust issues after this.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not? And even, who said this? This was Sammy who said this. Actually, just kidding, it was Romy who said this. She said that there's 10,000 religions and there's 10,000 ways to take your money. Yeah. So organized religion is just not something in the cards for her, but she does believe in some kind of energy and higher power. But organized religion, not for her. And I understand that completely. And I feel like I kind of relate to that on a personal level.
Same.
So it was really interesting to have those conversations. And I'm really hopeful for these people, and I feel like they're going to be a great support system for each other. Another thing that they all seem to relate about was survivor's guilt, which I thought was really interesting, because it's kind of like the war, right? The people who survive, and they have this guilt of like, why did I make it and not this person? Why has my life taken a turn for the better and not all these other people are stuck there? And you have to it's just reinforces this idea that yes, you do leave a cult and you're free in a sense, but in another sense you're never completely free, because you have all this stuff, all this baggage that sticks with you, and survivor's guilt being one of them. Did you ever think of survivor's guilt when it comes to leaving cults?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think the analogy you made with like the war is a pretty good one, because like you said, it's like, why do I, kind of get to be free now? Why did I see this and other people are still there suffering or didn't have the courage to, break out? I think that's a really good point. And I wasn't really surprised by it. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I feel like I would probably feel the same way.
Yeah, I think it's tough, but again, as you mentioned earlier, the word hope is a really important word for everybody out there, and especially for Sammy, because she was saying that she hopes to be reunited with her family, and even Sarah says that she hopes to just free more and more people, and this idea of hope is still really within them, and that made things leave at least on a happier note and a lighter note, that there's always hope for a better future. And I really, really hope that these people get to have a better future and lift themselves up, but
and lead other people to the better future, which they're obviously trying to do. And I think they'll be successful.
Yeah, I you know what? I really think so too, because it takes a lot of courage to go out and, regardless of your situation, being on camera is not, the most comfortable thing for most people. Mm-hmm. Being on a docu-series, it's not the most comfortable thing. And having to expose so much of yourself, so much deep rooted wounds just out to the world. I'm telling you, just like kudos to them, because that was just such bravery. Yeah. And again, hopefully this will allow people to have a better future. So thankful to Amy. So thankful to everyone we saw tonight. Is there anything you would like to bring up before we head into our special segment and our news and updates?
I think that we about covered it.
Yeah, we will be back again, as we said, for part 2 of the Survivors episode. But before then, let's head into our special segment that Taylor has prepared for us. So tell us, what is this special segment?
Yeah, so we decided to do something a little bit different this time, since we didn't really focus specifically on just one cult. So we thought it would be cool to bring your attention to some other famous cults that we might be able to see in season 2 if it gets renewed, and ones that I'd be really interested to see. So I have 3 for you. So the Charles Manson murders and cult is one of like the most famous ones in American history. There's been like several documentary series and fictional TV series. I know Aquarius is kind of based off of that from NBC. So basically the Manson cults called themselves Helter Skelter, I believe. Mm-hmm. And they also called themselves the Family. And basically what they tried to do was instigate a race war through murders of white people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one of them. That's like I said, in a lot of popular media, so you can definitely find a lot of fictional accounts of that. Heaven's Gates were a cult that believed the human soul is carried in a spaceship after death into the other dimension. So they were big into UFOs, and we haven't seen a lot of UFO cults.
No, we haven't at all.
Which I would love to see a UFO cult, because that seems really interesting. And also the People's Temple, also known as the Jonestown Massacre. So this one is where the phrase like drinking the Kool-Aid comes from, because Jim Jones kind of encouraged his followers to commit suicide by drinking a mixture of the powdered soft drink flavored agent laced with cyanide and other prescription drugs. Wow. So, yeah, drinking the Kool-Aid came from that.
That is insane. I had no idea. It's funny because there's all these expressions you never really think much of. You're like, it's a common saying. That is chilling. I cannot believe that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Taylor.
Yeah, I would love to see all 3 of these just be delved into.
Yeah. And again, I have to say, I'm really pushing. I need a show. So I don't know if it's a document. I would love it for it to be a documentary. Even potentially a scripted show of just a new life after a cult.
Right, because we have Kimmy Schmidt, but that's like really comedic.
Yeah, that we do have Kimmy Schmidt, which if you haven't seen, I really recommend. It's very comedic. It's really funny. We do a really great after show here too, so check that out as well. But yeah, it's giving me it's entertaining me, but it's not fully giving me what I need when it comes to this.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I'm telling you, writers, directors, producers, Hollywood people, there's something here.
There's the demand by at least 2 people, okay.
Yeah, it's really, so yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. Let's head into some news.
Yes.
Let's head into news.
AfterBuzz TV News.
What you got, Taylor?
All right, so news was actually really quiet this week on all of these cults, but I did manage to find some on the Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are actually planning a lot of conventions around the world, which is interesting. I'm not even sure what would go on at a Jehovah's Witness convention, but
let's not promote those too much.
Right. No. We won't promote them, but that was like a trend that I found in a lot of news sources, which was
You know what? I'm telling you, it's this show's coming out. These conversations like we're having today are more and more apparent. It's in the news. So when you see your cult being threatened, what do? You double down.
It's true.
So they're double downing, and they're getting these conventions, getting people together, trying to put the troops together and reinforce these notions of this is why we are who we are, and this cult is the best thing ever. So yeah. I'm not surprised.
That was an interesting one. Also, Jehovah's Witnesses are fleeing Russia to seek shelter in Finland because last year the Russian government actually declared them an extremist organization. So they're kind of being forced out into different areas, which was kind of interesting. It's interesting that some of these are like based really in the United States and some of them are worldwide.
Yeah, I mean that some of these are, as we came to find out, are super, super powerful. Mm-hmm. You gotta be careful what's out there.
That's about all I found for this week, but I don't know.
Thank you for
Hopefully, I hope we get some legal updates in, the ones that are having legal action.
Well, yeah, because the NXIVM right now is kind of, we talked more in depth about that in our first episode. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. But they're waiting for trial. Everything's just kind of on hold, and as soon as we have updates, we'll make sure to let you guys know, and we'll do so on Instagram actually. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. In the meantime, you can follow me on Instagram at Bonjour Juliet. I'll be sharing any more information that comes in once we do have that. Taylor, where can people find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter at alphabet_, and Instagram at Taylor_Gates_. I also host the 100 After Show every Tuesday at 10, Younger every Wednesday at 10, and Law & Order SVU every Thursday at 8, although we are taking a break this week for that one.
Oh, cool. Very, very cool. I have watched your that show, and I have to say you are amazing in it. So I
Thank
really,
you.
really recommend that. And I'm not just saying that because she's my co-host.
And then I'm right here.
Another thing I do before we do completely go, I want to let you know we're going to be covering the Sacred Lies after show here. It's a Facebook watch show that's actually a scripted show on cults. So make sure to follow us as we dissect that within the coming weeks. And yeah, thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.